Hey guys, TJ here at the MMA Jackal. So, UFC Mexico just ended like 5-10 minutes ago, and it's like 1 a.m. where I am here, but I'm going to give you a little breakdown of the card. I'll give you my thoughts on the fights, and we'll go through them from the top to the bottom, or the bottom to the top, however you want to look at it. We'll start with the early prelims. We'll finish off with the main event. Without further ado, let's get right into it. We'll go over UFC Mexico, Brandon Moreno versus Brandon Royval, the Battle of the Brandons. And like I said, we will start with the early prelims. The first fight of the night was Erick Silva versus Muhammad Naimov. Now, it seemed to start with a bang, kinda. The bell rings, Naimov comes out and throws a spinning back kick that looks at first like it lands, but it turns out that Erick Silva actually blows out his Achilles up against the fence. He stepped weird. His Achilles blew out, so he goes down to a knee. Naimov jumps on him, TKO, ground and pound finish. So that was the first fight of the night. Second fight of the night is actually a flyweight bout between Victor Altamirano and Felipe Dos Anjos. Watching this fight, I certainly didn't have it for Felipe Dos Anjos. I did have him in a parlay, which didn't hit for other reasons. However, two of the judges had it 29-28 for Victor Altamirano. It was a decent fight, some good back and forth, but I don't think there's too many people who agree with the two judges that actually did give it to Felipe Dos Anjos. Now, I don't know if they just knew that they were going to rob somebody later on in the card. So, they needed to make it look like they weren't trying to favor a hometown guy, so they stole one from one of their actual Mexican fighters. But whatever the reason, Dos Santos ends up getting the 29-28 split decision victory. So it is what it is. I'm not going to spend too much time on the early prelims and the prelims here. We'll, I'll talk a little longer, spend a little more time on anything I find that's poignant. But other than that, I'll keep it moving right along because I have a lot to say about the main event and co-main event. After the Altamirano Dos Santos fight, we have a flyweight bout between Ronaldo Rodriguez and Dennis Bondar. Right as soon as the fight starts, it's on. Dennis Bondar comes flying out of his corner, is mixing his striking with his grappling, doing an excellent job. He takes Rodriguez down, but it seems like, he's putting the pace on, and I think that altitude's getting to him because the second round comes out. Rodriguez actually ends up finding his back in a grappling exchange and sinks in a rear naked choke to finish the fight, which I was pretty surprised at. I thought Bondar was going to win. I predicted him to win. I was so confident in that I actually put a bet on him. So I was surprised to see it, but I think Rodriguez did get a little help from the altitude in this case. Either way, good on him. He gets a submission victory, and I'll be looking forward to see more from him in the future. So from there, we move up to the big guys of the night. The heaviest fighters on this entire card weighed 155 pounds. So, but it's what, I have no complaint. No complaint on this card. It was action-packed from top to bottom. It was more than you could ask for when it comes to a fight night. It was in front of a crowd, a raucous Mexican crowd in Mexico City. It's what I miss with fight nights. I've talked about it at length, but I have a love-hate relationship with the Apex. I'm so grateful it exists. It gave us something to watch during the shutdown, if you want to call it. But now it's like, what's the point? Why? When you can do things like this, I understand you have to put on some 40 some odd events a year, and why take the whole circus on the road when you can just have a show in your own backyard? I get it, but man, having fight nights in front of crowds is just, especially, the smaller cities that miss out. It used to be that if you lived in a little place like, you know, Buffalo or Cleveland or something like that, you had a chance at the UFC actually coming into town because they had so many fight night cards that they had to put on. They couldn't all be in Las Vegas. But not to ramble too much, the next fight's a lightweight bout. We have Claudio Puelles versus Fares Sahim. Forgive me with my pronunciation. This card isn't too bad with all the Mexican fighters. It's not like a bunch of guys from Dagestan or something, but I'm not the greatest with pronunciation. I'll do my best. So, Sahim controls most of round one. It's clear he's a superior grappler. This is your stereotypical grappler versus striker fight. Puelles lands a huge right hand that actually nearly finishes Sahim late in the first round. And but that was his chance to capitalize and win the fight. He didn't take full advantage of it. Sahim survives the round, goes into the second, continues to dominate with his grappling, and he's not just laying on him and holding him down. Almost all the grappling tonight, in fact, 98% of all the grappling tonight was action-packed. These guys are hunting submissions. They're moving from position to position. That's exactly what Fares Sahim did, and he won a split decision. I actually gave it to him unanimously, but the judges didn't, and nobody in the UFC gives a shit what I think. So it really doesn't matter. However, he does get the split decision win. Moving right along, we have a flyweight fight between Edgar Chairez versus Daniel Lacerda. Beautiful first round submission here for Chairez. He's actually fighting off his back from his guard, and he put Lacerda in what John Danaher would call a dilemma. So he was threatening an omoplata, which if Lacerda doesn't address, is going to be used against him, and Chairez is going to end up in top position. He's unlikely to finish an omoplata in MMA. It's an awkward position. There's even early on in a fight where guys aren't sweaty yet, there's not much to not enough friction there to hold the arm in place without a gi top, a sleeve, to really hold the arm between your legs. Anyway, he threatens the omoplata. Lacerda has to address it. He moves back to his left, and Chairez slaps on the triangle. Textbook. He throws his right leg across both the shoulder blades, locks it in place with his left hand holding his shin, uses his left leg, puts it in the hip, cuts the angle, closes his triangle, pulls the head. Night. Lacerda actually doesn't, he taps, but it was quick. I mean, it was a beautiful textbook triangle, and the crowd goes absolutely wild. The Mexican fighter wins, and the night is just rolling. Like I said, this is a great night of fights. I was super pumped. I usually do these videos Sunday morning, but I was all charged up from all the great fights, so I'm like, screw it, let's just get right to it and do a little late night, early morning recording. So after that, we have another flyweight bout. Jesus Aguilar against Mateus Mendoza. So I had Mateus controlling the majority of round one with his grappling, looking for subs the whole time. Like I said, 98% of the grappling on this card was action-packed. As someone who enjoys a little grappling in their MMA, this is great for me. Especially a card with so many, badass Mexican fighters. This is just great all around. Mateus, he's controlling most of the round one with his with his grappling. Now round 2 starts, and he adds in a little ground and pound with his control there. Right at the end of the round, Jesus lands a big right hand, a big overhand right into a double leg takedown. Now when it happened, I'm like, well, that's not the best fight IQ from Aguilar, because clearly Mateos is the superior grappler in this contest, you know. But I think it was something that was just natural to him. It's something he does all the time. He throws that big overhand right. Whether it lands or not, he uses that momentum to carry him right into the takedown. It was beautiful, but in my opinion, it wasn't enough to win the round. So I have it going into the third round, 2-0 for Mateos. So the round starts, and Aguilar actually jumps on a guillotine and ends up mounted with it. It looked tight for a second, but Mateos gets out of it relatively easily. It's a lot of back and forth the rest of the round. You might have been able to give that round to Aguilar, but in no way could you give him the fight. But somehow he wins. I don't know what these judges were. I don't like using the word robbery, you know, because anytime somebody loses a bet, the fight was a robbery. You know, oh, that was a robbery. If this wasn't a robbery, decisions don't get any worse without being one. Jesus Aguilar is coming out of this fight with the W, and he didn't deserve it. Not in my opinion. Not in the opinion of anyone anything I've seen on social media or YouTube chat rooms watching the fight. You know, there was 2 people who thought Jesus won this fight, and they just both happened to be judging it. So, what are you going to do? All right, so from there, we're going to go right on to Christian Quinones against Ronnie Barcelos. Man, I had this start. What an awesome fight. I had the first round as a clear Christian. I'm just going to call him Christian. A clear win for Christian. Quinones. All right. Barcelos goes back to his corner at the end of the first round, and they put his shoulder back in. He dislocated his shoulder in the first round. These guys are absolute savages. The second round starts, and they both come out throwing bombs, and they both hurt each other. It's an absolute war. Great fight. At the end of the second, though, the second round was much closer, but I still had it for Quinones. So, going into the third, I have Barcelos down 2-0, as I believe most people did. Another great back and forth round. Barcelos ends up winning a grappling exchange, finding himself on the back of Quinones and sinking in a rear naked choke for the come behind win. It was everything you could ask for in an MMA fight. I mean, I have no complaints on this card whatsoever. From there, we're going to go on to a lightweight bout. Manuel Torres versus Chris Duncan. Again, what more could you want? Now, we have Chris Duncan, this pasty white guy from Scotland. Manuel Torres, the hometown guy, Mexican fighter. The bell rings. Chris Duncan lands a big shot on Manuel Torres. I can't recall exactly what it was, but it stuns him. You know, you hear a big gasp from the crowd, but it didn't faze Torres. He ends up taking Duncan down, sinking in a rear naked choke before he even broke a sweat. And the crowd goes absolutely nuts. They're full-blown rocking now. It's just an awesome fight night. Everyone's having a great time. So let's throw in a little women's MMA, right? What better time? As far as female fights go, I mean, if you've watched any of my videos before, you know I'm not one of those MMA elitists who want to pretend like every woman's fight is some awesome spectacle that's super fun to watch, because the vast majority of them are not enjoyable to watch whatsoever. This one was not that bad. Well, let me tell you who was in it. First, we have Yasmin Hadigi versus Sam Hughes in a strawweight fight. It was all right. Hadigi beat the shit out of Sam Hughes. You know, it was a stand-up battle for all 3 rounds. All 3 rounds, Hadigi just pieced her up. She wins unanimous decision. What more can you say? That was it. Now we're full blown out of the main card here. We have a bantamweight fight between Raul Rosas Jr. and his unfortunate face against Ricky Tercios. And this fight was actually canceled. Now, Rosas apparently was complaining of some ailment. I don't know if he had the flu or what it was. And I guess he was like battling it for the past day or two. And the fight came down to a game time decision. They decided to call it, which didn't hurt my feelings any, because they're actually putting it on next week's Apex fight night, which is probably not going to be as exciting as it was tonight. And something that very well could help it would be a Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Tercios fight. So we have that to look forward to next Saturday. And I'm sure I'll be making a video on that too. So tune in. Next, we go back up to the lightweights. We have Daniel Zellhuber versus Francisco Prado. Man, what a great fight. So Prado had an uphill battle from the start, trying to get inside Zellhuber's reach. So Zellhuber, he's 15-1, and he has a 77-inch reach. He's 6'1" at 155 pounds. So, you know, like I said, Prado's got an uphill battle for him. And at the start of the fight, he was doing a good job. As the shorter fighter, you got no choice. You're going to have to eat some shots to get inside. And he was doing that, you know. You just hope that the ones you eat aren't going to put you out. So Prado's doing an excellent job rushing in, lunging in, landing the big, powerful shots. Zellhuber's fighting behind his jab, keeping him at the end of his strikes. MMA striking has evolved a lot in the last maybe decade or so, and these fighters are not just backyard brawlers anymore. I know boxing connoisseurs would watch MMA striking and be like, what is this? But now these guys are, I mean, they are legit. They are trained by the same boxing coaches as professional fighters, and they know how to fight at length and fight behind their jab. Zellhuber does an excellent job of it. The second round starts, and he lands a beautiful jab right on Prado's eye. I don't know if he broke his eye socket, but he busted his eye open. He starts getting blood in his eye, and it really changes the whole complexion of the fight. Prado is really not the same after that. The kid's got the heart of a lion. He never quits. On the stool between round 2 and 3, he looked really, really dejected. And his coaches, they had a he's Argentinian, I believe, but they had a translator in there who I don't think, you know, I don't speak Spanish, but I don't think he was doing a very good job of translating, because, you know, he sounded like me making a MMA recap video. There was a lot of pauses and so, but you could tell Prado was pretty dejected. He knew he was losing. He was down and out. He comes out in the third round and just throws caution to the wind. You know, he went out on his shield. He's a warrior. Obviously, he loses a unanimous decision, but I'm very excited to see this kid fight in the future. Both these guys. They're both. I think Prado's 21 and Zellhuber he's 24. He's 24. All right, guys. Now we're into the meat and potatoes of this bad boy here. Yair Rodriguez versus Brian Ortega. I usually start out by saying something like, so the bell rings. Well, the bell doesn't even ring. The fighters are getting announced, and Bruce Buffer's doing his thing. Brian Ortega's like jumping up and down, shaking out. He jumps up and, lifts his knees up to his chest, comes back down and rolls his ankle. He rolls his ankle and then they show him. He looks back at his corner like, oh, oh no. And we all know the first fight, how that went. It was a win for Yair because Ortega basically blew his shoulder out. So I was like, this can't be happening again, can it? Well, the bell actually does ring, and Yair comes out like a bat out of hell. I mean, this dude strikes. He is, he does an excellent job of mixing his flashy taekwondo in with MMA. He's throwing these big Yair Rodriguez style kicks and punches. He ends up landing a huge, I believe it was a straight right on Brian Ortega, and it drops him. He follows it up with a flurry of punches. And I'm thinking, I've been saying for a while now that I believe 2024 is going to be the year of the changing of the guard. And I'm literally thinking in my head, well, this is it. Brian Ortega's, he's part of that old guard. He's getting up there in age. He's not what he used to be. He doesn't have the chin like he, had before. And this is it. This is the time for guys like Yair to make a name for themselves. I mean, he already has. He's a huge name in the featherweight division, but you know what I'm saying. So Ortega ends up surviving. In fact, he finishes the first round fully mounted on Yair, but it doesn't feel like he's winning. It feels like the second round, the bell's going to ring and Yair's going to land some spinning head kick or roundhouse or, uppercut, some huge strike, and Brian Ortega is going to get laid out flat. That is not the case. Ortega regains his composure, shoots a takedown on Yair and actually gets it. Now, Yair didn't do a very good job of defending the takedown, and he kind of went after the guillotine, which, if I was his coach, I would advise him to not try and guillotine one of the best jiu-jitsu fighters in MMA, but he did. Ortega wasn't phased. He takes him to the mat, works out of the guillotine, and now he's on top. And it's early in the second round. And I'm sure Brian Ortega's like, all right, I just ate the biggest strike that he could land on me so far. And I survived. Now it's early in the second round. This is a 5-round fight, which I'm not exactly sure why, but I'm not complaining. And he's, all right, I'm on top. Obviously, it's Brian Ortega. He's not just laying and praying. He's working through his guard, starts to land some ground and pound. He's now he's busting Yair up. The round ends. They go back to the corners. Ortega's feeling himself, right? And I'm like, oh shit, boy, we got to fight. This is a Brian Ortega fight. He's one of those guys who needs to get punched in the face and have a little blood coming out of his nose before he, really starts to turn it on. Well, he turned it on in the third round. Lands a takedown right off the rip. Works through his guard. Yair is a well-rounded martial artist, and he's very good at grappling, but he's not on the same level as Brian Ortega. Not many people are. Ortega works right through his guard, half guard, mount, cinches up the arm triangle, dismounts the side control, and that's all she wrote. Brian Ortega with the submission victory early in the third round after getting absolutely rocked in the first. And after that first round, I could have live bet, but I guarantee there weren't many people rushing to the ticket counter trying to place bets on Brian Ortega. But they should have, because the dude is an absolute warrior. You know, he gets on the mic and he's Brian Ortega. You know, you can't not love the guy. He's like Max Holloway. You know, it's just a fan favorite, and this is exactly why. The dude can take an absolute beating. He's never out of the fight. He's always dangerous. I mean, the fact that Volkanovski got out of Brian Ortega's mounted guillotine, it's the reason it was such a big deal. You know, it's not a normal guillotine. Brian Ortega is not your average MMA grappler. You know, if submission grappling paid as well as MMA, this dude would have a career in it. So, great on him. I don't know how he matches up with Topuria. Yair is a great striker, but he doesn't have that thump like Topuria does. And I don't think Ortega survives that first round power of Topuria. But he's a very good candidate for his next fight. So we very well may see. Moving on from then, we have the main event of the evening. The Battle of the Brandons at flyweight. Brandon Moreno versus Brandon Royval. It's a flyweight fight with a Mexican fighter. It wasn't boring, believe it or not. The fight starts, and Brandon Moreno actually spends the first minute and a half just circling around the octagon. And Royval's, following him all around. I don't even think Moreno threw a strike in the first minute and a half. And, Royval's feinting and throwing. It's just feeling out. When they finally do exchange, it's clear Royval's going to be throwing the volume. Moreno's going to be throwing the power. And that's pretty much how the whole fight went. The second round starts right off the rip. Moreno lands a big counter strike. Royval just eats it like it's an ice cream sandwich. But these guys are flyweights. It's not that uncommon for big strikes to land, and it doesn't exactly flatline them right off the rip. Now the fight continues, and there wasn't very much grappling. The little bit of grappling there was, especially the little bit in the third round, was absolutely insane. The pace at which these guys can grapple is nuts. I don't know how to explain it. It's just absolutely insane. This was not a grappling match whatsoever. The only one who initiated any at all was Brandon Moreno. He did a really good job of waiting for the counter. Royval would throw a combination. Brandon Moreno would follow up, and then just like earlier in the night, he would throw a big overhand right and follow that up with, use that momentum to carry him into a takedown. So if you throw a big overhand, you're coming over the top, that momentum is going to take you into a single leg. Now you have to be careful, because that could also take you into a knee and, put your lights out. But if you know what you're doing, you can actually use the momentum of a missed strike or a partially landed overhand and grab up a single leg, which Moreno tried to do a few times. He would grab that single leg, try to kick out the back leg or step in, putting his right leg behind the freestanding leg of Royval and run him down. He wasn't running the pipe, so to speak. If you don't know what that means, it's when a fighter picks up a single leg and actually does a back step and bow while holding onto the single leg to put the fighter down. But I digress. The third round continues, and really this whole fight is just more of the same. It's Brandon Royval throwing the volume, constantly fighting behind his jab, throwing his jab 1, 2, 3, 4 at a time, following it up with an overhand or an uppercut, and then Royval or Moreno using that opportunity to counter with a few big heavy shots, a 1-2, a 1-2-3. Now, Saeed Sayoud, Moreno's coach, is actually yelling at him to start throwing combinations because Royval is starting to not counter the counter, but time Moreno's counter. He knows, okay, I'm going to come in, I'm going to throw my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I know as soon as that's done, he's going to throw his 1, 2. Early in the fight, Royval was having difficulty getting out. He would throw his combination and stay in the pocket long enough for Moreno to actually land his punches. Now, as the fight went on, he was doing much better job of actually getting out of the way. One thing he really couldn't ever get out of the way of was Brandon Moreno's leg kick. So he would throw his combination, Moreno would throw his 1, 2, and then land with the leg kick. And that was really starting to add up and really affect Royval. Going into the 5th round, I had it 2-2. I think most people had it 2-2. Seems like the judges had it 2-2. And personally, I thought that Moreno did enough. If you're going to judge the fight based on damage being the number one criteria, I think if a fighter lands 3 or 4 or 5 punches on a guard, and they all hit my hands, and then I land 2 that hit you in the jaw, those 2 should count more. In no way am I saying that Royval doesn't deserve this win. He absolutely did. I'm just giving my opinion on why I thought Brandon Moreno might have won the 5th round. He also was the only guy mixing in takedowns. Now, he didn't do anything with his takedowns, and the second he got the takedown, Royval popped right back up. In the 5th round, he didn't even get him down. He just rushed in with his combination, typically after Royval threw his, and he pushed him up against the fence. Now, Herb Dean was having none of it. I have never seen a referee break up a grappling exchange as fast as I saw Herb Dean break up the second clinch between these guys. The first time they clinched up, Moreno pushed him up against the fence. He had the body lock, and I mean, they're fighting at whatever it is, 7,000 feet of elevation. Granted, these guys are flyweights and they got gas tanks that can go for weeks, but sooner or later, you're going to get tired. And they're tired. So he's using that to, catch his breath. And I think he was hoping that the judges were going to put a little more emphasis on control, which we've seen from earlier fights in the night, and just the fact that the judging criteria specifically states that damage is more important than control time. It didn't exactly work out for him. Brandon Royval gets the split decision win. Gets on the mic and a little uncharacteristic of him, kind of the sound, he tries to sound like a gangster. He calls out Pantoja. He's swearing, he's like, I'm Brandon Royval, West Side, whatever. If you've ever seen an interview with Brandon Royval, that's not him. He's not some Mexican gangster. I don't know. Just because I knew that's not his personality, it seemed kind of corny to me. But whatever. He's trying to get a soundbite. He's trying to get his title shot. Good on him. He deserves it. I do think the UFC was really trying to set up Moreno Pantoja 3, which signed me up. But hey, Pantoja Royval 2, sign me up. I will watch that all day long. So, all right, guys. Well, that's my thoughts on the fights. Let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, if this is your first time catching a MMA Jackal video and you're new here, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, tell your friends about me, leave a comment, let me know what you think, insult me, whatever. But, yeah, I appreciate you tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one next week. Actually, before that, I will be posting a video later this week, probably on Justin Poirier versus Benoit Saint Denis. So stay tuned for that. All right, guys. Hey, go Bills.